Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Sally Ray toku ingoa. Greetings and welcome to the presentation. My name is Dr. Sally Ray and my topic is level playing fields do not exist in sport. This presentation is based on my Aotearoa New Zealand PhD Feminist Hermeneutic Research, which looked at the experiences of women, graduates and practitioners in sports management. However, the findings, messages and meanings apply across many industries and a variety of roles, if not all roles. For example, the banking, real estate industry, or coaching and sports medicine. Why sport? Well, sport, like many countries, is deeply embedded in the culture, strongly influencing how we live our lives, how our local communities interact, and who we are as a nation. Also, how the rest of the world perceives us. As such, the power of sport can be used to promote equality and fairness for everyone. Or it can, on the other hand, perpetuate the historic, sexist, marginalising, hegemonic, patriarchal, masculine systems and structures and practices that already exist. In 2017, I conducted focus groups and some one-on-one interviews with women in sport management to hear about their experiences and how they navigated the highly gendered, visible and invisible practices which marginalise women in sport management in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So what I used is a thing called a multi-level analytic framework. Fancy term, don't get put off by it. It's just a very simple way of breaking what could be deemed as a too big a problem down into more bite-sized chunks. Sometimes we get to a point where you go, where do I start? It seems so big. Now in this instance, I used macro, meso, and micro layers, and I used the pyramid in this presentation or in this design to help you think about where these different areas are. Now don't get too caught up if you go, oh, should that issue be in macro or meso, or is it more meso or micro? Don't worry about that. The fact is that you have thought about the idea. So again, as I say, this is a great framework for complex and multifaceted issues like how does gender play out in sports organisations in Aotearoa, New Zealand, or in your country. So what we're going to do is first of all have a look at the macro layer, and macro is for me the top of the pyramid, and it is also known as governmentality, and this is for organisations, situations, structures and practices that are very dominant, that are formed at a country level, at a government level. So if we have a look at some of the terms that we've got here. So macro and governmentality include things like culture. And if we have a look at culture, culture are the socially learned values, beliefs, rituals and behaviours that members of a particular society play out, and how those individuals interpret their experiences. So in a patriarchal culture, which we have in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the social structures and practices that underpin our society is that men are the normal and legitimate possessors of power, and women and other minorities are marginalised. Hegemony, on the other hand, is the undisputed and natural and normal, scary, supreme leadership of or dominance of one group over another. So when we have a look at some of the research that backs the fact that we do have a hegemonic patriarchal society in New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand's National Council of Women in 2017 outsourced some research on gender attitudes, and it found that 50% of the respondents believed that gender equality in Aotearoa New Zealand had been attained. Yet in the same survey, it revealed that 9% of the respondents believed boys were deemed to be better leaders than girls. 6% of the people considered boys were smarter than girls. And just like in my family, 7% believed sons should be encouraged more than daughters to attend university. The Gender Attitude Survey also revealed the workplace as a further site of inequality, with 31% of the respondents signalling gender inequality existed in the workplace, and 37% believed gender inequality was more prevalent in sport management, and especially in senior management. Furthermore, 22% of the participants cited gender inequalities needed rectifying, and 50% said gender inequalities in the media needed rectifying. 7% of the people believed that men were best suited to be business leaders. And we know that media, in Aotearoa New Zealand, I think women get about 6 or 8% of the media. And then we've only just seen a change recently of the content isn't about what they look like anymore or how they dress, but more about their skills. When we consider economics, we know that women are disadvantaged with the funding, the sponsorship of their sport. And then we have another layer of governmentality, which is law and legislation. We have in New Zealand a Human Rights Act where people need to be treated fairly, yet often because the beliefs, the systems and the practices that underpin our patriarchal society haven't changed, the law actually allows these the marginalisation of minorities to continue covered by this act. People say, well, it can't happen because we've got this act in place, but it's not how it is. We also know that in 2018, Sport New Zealand produced their annual report, and it showed that the pay gender gap in the government, how sport is delivered in New Zealand, the governing bodies of sport in New Zealand, the pay gender gap was 21.8%, which was 12.6% higher than the New Zealand average. So we also know that women are in greater numbers lower down the hierarchy as opposed to in governance levels. So that brings us into the next layer of the multi-level analytic framework, which is the meso level. And that's at the organisational level, like your national sporting organisations, your regional sporting organisations. And this pattern continues that we've just spoken about before at these lower levels. And we know that deeply entrenched in their structures, practices and policies is a gender bias. And it's dominant, often invisible, and it's taken for granted, and women are marginalised. So what we have is we have women being marginalised up the hierarchy. We have women being marginalised across through gendered roles. They're further marginalised within flexible hours, especially if they're parenting. And we know that male attributes are often preferred over female attributes. We have situations of practices where we have the male appointment panels which marginalise women, and especially one that is rife in New Zealand is the old boys network, where men tend to employ other men who are like them, especially white middle-aged men, appointing men who are similar and align with their male standpoint. And then we come along to the final layer of the structure, and as you can note here in each of the slides, I've had actually action points that we can put in place to start abruptly changing these practices. Now at the micro level, which is a huge level in my diagram, and I believe it is as such, women are socially constructed. They have stereotypes and they're conditioned. From the age of 3 or 6, 3 we know what socially accepted behaviour of a child, 6 we know what roles are socially acceptable as well. Women have to decide what they do for careers, whether or not they have children. We need to talk about this as a group. Thank you for listening. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.